If the seal is missing, the paper is worthless. The words of a young girl who would change the fate of a desperate millionaire. In the pouring rain, his hands were empty. The silence of an empire collapsing. Eyes that could no longer find meaning among damp papers and soulless signatures, until a small shadow in the storm, clutching a brown folder, returned to him not only his lost documents, but the purpose he never knew he was searching for. Like this, if it touched your heart. Comment on how you think this story will end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs nothing, but it means everything. Try again. New York City was waking up under a grey blanket that wrapped the skyscrapers like a premonition. On the 25th floor of the Freedom Tower, Alexander Sterling stared out at the urban skyline, his gaze lost and his heart pounding. The first rays of sun barely managed to filter through the thick clouds, casting long shadows over the documents scattered across his mahogany desk. At 42, Alexander had built an empire from nothing, 15 years of tireless work, sleepless nights, and risky decisions, and now everything could vanish in less than 3 hours. He consulted his wristwatch for the umpteenth time. 7:25 a.m. The meeting with the Hamilton Group investors was scheduled for 10 o'clock sharp. If he couldn't present the original documents proving his innocence against the contractual fraud accusations, he would lose everything. "They have to be here," he murmured, frantically searching through folders and drawers with trembling hands. His reflection in the window showed him a man who was elegant but exhausted. The impeccable navy suit contrasted sharply with the deep circles under his eyes and the days-old stubble. The perfectly tied knot of his tie seemed to be choking him. His assistant, Sarah Jenkins, tapped gently on the door before entering with a tray. "Mr. Sterling, I brought you a coffee. Did you find the documents?" Alexander shook his head as he accepted the steaming cup. "They disappeared a week ago. The brown folder with the gold seal, it's as if it vanished into thin air." Sarah pressed her lips together with concern. She had worked for Alexander for 10 years, long enough to know she had never seen him so desperate. "Victor Stone will be there, right?" she asked, referring to Alexander's main rival, a businessman known for his aggressive tactics. "Of course, waiting like a vulture," he replied bitterly. "This meeting is his perfect opportunity to sink my reputation and steal my investors." Alexander walked over to the window. New York was waking up under the gentle drizzle that had begun to fall. Below, on Fifth Avenue, morning traffic moved impatiently. Pedestrians with umbrellas hurried toward their jobs. And then he saw her, a small girl, sitting on the curb right in front of the building. She wore a coat that was too big for her small body, and in her arms, clutched like a treasure, was a brown folder with what looked like a gold seal on the edge. Alexander narrowed his eyes, incredulous. "It's impossible," he whispered. Without a word to Sarah, he dashed out of his office, leaving his half-finished coffee cup and the door wide open. The elevator seemed to descend with agonizing slowness. Alexander nervously tapped the floor with the tip of his Italian shoe as the numbers on the electronic panel decreased slowly. 24, 23, 22. Every second was precious. What if the girl left? What if that folder wasn't his but a cruel coincidence? When he finally reached the lobby, he sprinted across the marble floor, ignoring the greetings of the security staff. The revolving doors let him out into the cold morning air. The drizzle had picked up slightly, soaking his designer suit. He crossed the street, dodging cars and receiving angry honks from irritated drivers. By the time he reached the opposite sidewalk, he was breathless. His hair stuck to his forehead. From the dampness, the girl was still there, motionless as a small statue. She must have been about 9, though her expression reflected the wisdom of someone much older. Her black hair, tied back in a messy ponytail, framed a thin face with large, dark eyes. The olive-green coat that covered her looked like it had belonged to an adult and was patched in several places. Alexander approached, trying to control his anxiety. He didn't want to scare her. "Hello," he said, crouching down to her. "Neville, what's your name?" The girl looked at him with distrust, tightening her grip on the folder against her chest. "Why do you want to know?" she replied, her accent suggesting she was from one of the city's rougher neighborhoods. "My name is Alexander," he continued, ignoring her hostility. "I was looking out my office window, and I thought I saw that you might have something that belongs to me." The girl's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "The folder? I found it. It's mine now." Alexander took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. He sat on the curb next to her, not caring that the dampness was soaking his $600 trousers. "Where did you find it?" The little girl hesitated a few moments before answering. 3 days ago, near Central Park. It was lying there, all wet from the rain. Nobody wanted it, so I took it." Alexander looked at the folder more closely. Despite some damp stains, it was unmistakably his, aged brown leather, with his company's gold seal in the bottom corner. "It's very important to me," he explained softly. "It contains documents I urgently need." The girl stared at him, as if evaluating him. Her fingers, small and red from the cold, stroked the edge of the folder. "And what do I get if I give it to you?" she finally asked. The question, direct and devoid of any childish artifice, surprised Alexander. This was no ordinary child. "Are you hungry?" he asked, noticing how she furtively looked at the bakery on the corner. A slight nod was her only reply. "How about we go to that cafe?" He pointed to a small establishment nearby. "And while you have something warm to eat, we can talk about the folder." The girl seemed to consider the offer, evaluating the risks with a maturity inappropriate for her age. "Okay," she finally agreed, "but the folder stays with me until I decide." Alexander nodded, extending his hand to help her up. She ignored the gesture and stood up by herself, walking with dignity toward the cafe, as if the encounter had been her idea all along. The corner bistro was one of those authentic establishments heroically resisting the invasion of international chains. Red and white checkered tablecloths, tiles worn by decades of use, and the unmistakable aroma of fresh bagels and coffee. At that hour, a few workers were hastily having breakfast before starting their day. When Alexander entered accompanied by the girl, several curious glances fell upon them. A soaked businessman and a disheveled little girl made an unusual pair. They sat at a back table, next to the window fogged up with condensation. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with impossible blonde hair, approached with her pad in hand. "What'll it be?" she asked, alternating her gaze between the elegant adult and the girl who seemed not to belong in the setting. "Just a black coffee for me," Alexander replied, and then looked at the little girl. "What would you like?" The girl's eyes scanned the menu board with contained eagerness. "A hot chocolate and a ham and cheese sandwich," she said with a firm voice, like someone accustomed to seizing opportunities when they arose. "And add a side of hash browns and a pastry," Alexander completed, perceiving the hunger in the girl's eyes. When the waitress walked away, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. The girl placed the folder on her lap, keeping it out of Alexander's reach. "What's your name?" he insisted, trying to establish a connection. "I already told you mine." The little girl played with a napkin, meticulously folding it into geometric shapes. "Lily," she finally answered. "My name is Lily Morales." "Do you live near here, Lily?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds. The girl's face hardened. "I don't live anywhere fixed right now." Alexander absorbed the answer, feeling a pang of discomfort. "And your parents?" "My mom is sick," Lily answered, without looking up. "Her name is Maria Morales. She lost her cleaning job a few months ago and then she got sick. We're looking for a place." She didn't mention her father, and Alexander didn't press. The waitress returned with the order. The chocolate was steaming in a large mug, and the plate with the sandwich, hash browns and pastry looked like a feast for the little girl. Yet Lily didn't pounce on the food. With surprising dignity, she unfolded the napkin and placed it on her lap before beginning to eat with careful manners. Alexander stirred his coffee, observing her discreetly. Beneath the neglected appearance, careful upbringing was evident. "Your mother taught you good manners," he commented. Lily nodded slightly as she chewed. "Mom worked in important people's houses. She says a person is measured by how they behave when no important person is watching them." The sentence, recited with the innocence of someone repeating a learned lesson, impacted Alexander more than he expected. He suddenly remembered his own mother, who had passed away years ago, and her teachings about dignity and respect. "She's a wise woman, your mother," he said sincerely. Time was pressing. Alexander checked his watch. 8:40. He needed those documents. "Lily, that folder you found contains very important papers for me," he explained, pointing to it. "I have a meeting in a little over an hour where I must present them. Without them, I could lose my company, my job." The girl took a sip of her chocolate, leaving a small brown mustache on her upper lip. "And why was it lying in Central Park if it's so important?" The question, direct and logical, disarmed Alexander. I had it with me when I went to a meeting near there. I must have lost it on the way out, he confessed. It's been a horrible week looking for it. Lily looked straight at him, as if she could see right through him. Finally, after carefully wiping her lips with the napkin, she spoke. What would you give me in exchange? Alexander, prepared to offer money, stopped at the girl's serious expression. Something told him this wasn't just about money. What do you need? He asked instead. Lily looked down at her worn shoes. Mum needs a doctor, and She paused. I want to go back to school, and a place where it doesn't rain inside. The simplicity of those wishes moved Alexander. While he was worried about millions of dollars, this girl only wanted the basics every human being deserves. If you help me, I swear you'll have school, food, and a roof over your head, he promised solemnly. And your mother will receive medical attention. Lily studied his face for what seemed like an eternity. Her eyes, too old for a child, searched for signs of deception. But make it real, okay? She finally said, her voice barely a whisper. No more empty promises. That phrase, loaded with a distrust acquired through disappointment, pierced Alexander like a dart. Real, he assured, extending his hand to seal the deal. After a moment of hesitation, Lily shook his hand firmly. Then, with a solemn gesture, she placed the folder on the table, sliding it toward him. Alexander opened it with trembling fingers. There were all the documents, the original contracts, the receipts, the notarial certifications, everything he needed to prove his innocence. How can I ever thank you? He murmured, feeling immense relief. Lily finished the last piece of pastry before answering. By keeping your promise, she said simply, and for the first time since they met, she smiled. At 9:30, Alexander strode into the lobby of the Freedom Tower with a determined step. Beside him, Lily looked on with astonishment at the building's opulence, the soaring ceilings, the crystal chandeliers, the men and women in elegant suits, moving like actors on a predetermined stage. Mr. Sterling, the security guard, greeted him with surprise at the sight of his small companion. Good morning, Javier, Alexander replied with renewed confidence. This is Lily, my special guest today. As they rode up in the private elevator, Alexander tried to organize his thoughts. The folder was safe under his arm, but now he had an added responsibility. The girl. He couldn't just abandon her after getting what he needed. He had made a promise. When the doors opened on the 25th floor, Sarah nearly bumped into them. Her expression of relief at seeing the folder quickly turned to curiosity upon noticing Lily. I found it, Alexander announced, holding up the folder. And she is Lily, who rescued it. Sarah, could you get her something to drink while I'm in the meeting? She'll also need dry clothes and... He broke off, realizing he was improvising on the fly. Sarah, efficient as always, nodded without asking questions. I'll take care of everything. The boardroom is ready. The investors will start arriving in 20 minutes. Alexander crouched down in front of Lily. I have to go to this important meeting. Sarah will look after you in the meantime, all right? When I'm done, we'll talk about your mother. Lily nodded, though. Her eyes reflected the distrust of someone who had seen too many broken promises. Can I see the papers first? She suddenly asked. The request surprised Alexander. The papers? Why? To make sure they're all there, she replied naturally. I was looking at them these last few days. There are a lot of numbers and signatures. With some hesitation, Alexander handed her the folder. Lily opened it with reverential care, turning the pages delicately. Her small fingers stopped at certain documents, as if she remembered their exact location. One is missing, she finally said. Alexander's heart skipped a beat. What did you say? A paper with a big red and gold seal, Lily explained. I kept it separate because it was the prettiest. She searched the inside pocket of her coat and carefully extracted a folded document. It was precisely the Chamber of Commerce certification, validating the stock ownership, the most crucial document of all. Mum always said that if the seal is missing, the paper is worthless, Lily commented as she handed it to him. Alexander took the document as if it were a treasure, moved by the girl's innocence and at the same time, her astonishing intuition. Your mother is absolutely right, Lily. Without this seal, none of this would be valid. After ensuring Lily was in good hands with Sarah, Alexander headed to his office to prepare. He had barely 15 minutes to review the documents and organize his thoughts before the confrontation. He had just started when his phone rang. It was John, the lobby guard. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Victor Stone has just arrived. He's on his way to the boardroom." Alexander thanked him for the alert. Victor always arrived early to try and control the playing field. It was part of his intimidating strategy. With the folder under his arm, Alexander went out into the hallway and headed to the meeting room. Turning the corner, he came face to face with his rival. Victor Stone, at 52, represented everything Alexander despised in the business world. Tall, powerfully built, and with his hair perfectly slicked back with too much gel, he wore a suit that seemed to scream its price. His smile, practiced in the mirror every morning, never reached his eyes. "Alexander, what a surprise to see you so composed," he greeted with false cordiality. "After the week you've had, I expected to find you more affected." Alexander maintained his composure, aware that every word was part of a psychological game. "Good morning, Victor. I see you're keeping up your habit of arriving early. Eager for the meeting?" Victor's gaze darted to the folder Alexander was carrying. "Are those the famous lost documents?" he asked, with a tone that mixed disbelief and disappointment. "How convenient that they appeared just today. The truth always finds its way, Victor, something you should bear in mind." The tension between the two was palpable. Victor stepped forward, deliberately invading Alexander's personal space. "Don't think a few papers will change what we all know," he murmured. "Your company is on the verge of collapse. Today you'll only delay the inevitable." Before Alexander could respond, the elevator doors opened and several executives from the investor group began to step out. Victor retreated, instantly recovering his commercial smile. "Ah, gentlemen," he exclaimed enthusiastically. "We were just talking about how exciting this meeting is going to be." As the investors approached for the customary greetings, Alexander noticed Victor's gaze, cold and calculating. He wasn't just a business rival. There was something personal, almost visceral in his animosity. The battle was about to begin, and Alexander knew Victor wouldn't play fair. But now he had the documents, and more importantly, he had a new perspective on what truly mattered. A little girl had reminded him, with her simple wisdom, that sometimes the smallest details, like a seal, could make all the difference. The boardroom of Sterling Investments occupied the northeast corner of the 25th floor, offering a panoramic view of New York City that usually impressed visitors. That morning, however, the persistent haze blurred the urban landscape, creating a grayish backdrop that seemed to reflect the tension inside. 12 people had gathered around the oval table of solid oak. At one end, Alexander occupied the head seat, with his lawyer David Chen on his right and his financial director on his left. Across from him, Victor Stone displayed his best smile while chatting animatedly with the 5 representatives of the Hamilton Group, key investors whose support was at stake. The picture was completed by 3 members of Alexander's company administrative board, who observed the scene with inscrutable neutral expressions. "I believe we can begin," Alexander announced, checking his watch. 10:05, slightly late, but all the main players were present. At a signal from him, Sarah closed the door and activated the presentation system. The giant screen on the wall showed the Sterling Investments logo, a stylized building with a bridge connecting 2 towers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander began, straightening in his seat, "I appreciate your presence at this extraordinary meeting. As you know, rumors and accusations have circulated in recent weeks about alleged irregularities in our contracts with the Hamilton Group." Victor leaned back in his chair, toying with a luxurious pen between his fingers. "Rumors backed by rather solid evidence, if I may add," he interrupted with venomous smoothness. Alexander gave him a serene look before continuing. "It is precisely to address that evidence that I have called you here today." He opened the folder with deliberate slowness. "I have here the original documents that demonstrate the absolute legality of all our operations." One by one, he explained the contracts, the dates, the agreed-upon terms. David Chen, his lawyer, supplemented the presentation with technical clarifications when necessary. The investors listened carefully, taking occasional notes. For 40 minutes, Alexander presented irrefutable evidence that the accusations were unfounded. The initial tension began to dissipate, replaced by a more relaxed atmosphere. Even some of the investors nodded in approval. Victor, however, maintained his confident smile. When Alexander concluded his presentation, he immediately raised his hand. "Very impressive, Alexander. Truly. Admirable," he said condescendingly. But I'm afraid you've omitted a crucial detail. All eyes turned to him. Victor opened his own briefcase and extracted a folder similar to Alexander's. I would like to present an additional document that completely changes the landscape. With studied theatricality, he pulled out a contract and slid it toward the center of the table. This agreement, signed 3 years ago, clearly states that any irregularity in delivery times, such as those that have occurred in the last 6 months, grants the Hamilton Group the right to renegotiate the terms of the framework contract. Alexander remained calm, although he felt control of the situation beginning to slip away. I never signed such a clause, Victor. That document must be a forgery? Victor feigned offense. Please, that is a very serious accusation. Here is your signature, perfectly legal and verifiable. The principal representative of the Hamilton Group, an elderly man named James. Hamilton took the document with a worried expression. Indeed, these clauses were not part of our original agreement, he murmured as he read. Because they were added in a subsequent addendum, Victor explained confidently. An addendum that, conveniently, Alexander seems to have lost among his reappeared documents. The room fell into a tense silence. Alexander felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Was it possible that he had signed that document and forgotten about it? No, it was unthinkable. He would never have accepted such unfavorable terms. David Chen asked to examine the contract. As the lawyer studied it intently, Victor continued, "In view of this situation, I propose an amicable solution." He smiled, showing perfect teeth. "Sterling Investments will cede 40% of its shares to me at half market value, and in exchange we will forget this inconvenience." The board members exchanged alarmed glances. Such an agreement would practically mean handing over control of the company. Alexander took a deep breath, trying to maintain serenity. In his mind, Lily's words unexpectedly resonated. If the seal is missing, the paper is worthless. "David," he called his lawyer, "could you verify if that document has all the required official seals?" The lawyer, surprised by the specific question, examined the contract again with greater attention. "Indeed," he murmured after a moment. "The seal of the New York Chamber of Commerce is missing on the signature." "Page." Victor dismissed the detail with a contemptuous gesture. "A irrelevant technicality. The signature is what counts, and it's clearly stamped." Alexander slowly stood up, a new confidence illuminating his face. "It's not a mere technicality, Victor. As you well know, according to Section 17 of the Commercial Code, any contract modification affecting more than 20% of the capital must bear the official chamber seal to be valid. Without that seal, this document," he pointed disdainfully at the paper, "is as valid as a monopoly bill." A murmur ran around the table. Victor visibly paled, trying to maintain his facade of security. "That can be easily fixed. We can send the document to the chamber today." James Hamilton, the main investor, raised his hand to interrupt him. "Just a moment, Mr. Stone. If I understand correctly, are you admitting that you presented an incomplete document as if it were legal and binding?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Victor stammered a vague response about administrative procedures and bureaucracy. Alexander seized the moment to regain control. "Gentlemen, I think it's clear what happened here. An attempt was made to pressure our company with an invalid, probably forged document." He turned to David. "Would you recommend pursuing legal action?" The lawyer nodded gravely. "We could be facing a case of attempted fraud and document forgery." Victor's expression completely crumbled. His strategy had collapsed. Due to the absence of a simple seal, a detail any experienced businessman should have foreseen. Now he had not only failed in his attempt to take control, but was facing possible legal consequences. "I suggest a 15-minute recess," Alexander proposed with calculated magnanimity, "so we can all reflect on what has occurred." The attendees nodded, relieved by the opportunity to momentarily escape the tension. Victor was the first to get up, hastily collecting his documents and avoiding eye contact with anyone. As everyone began to leave, Alexander remained seated, watching through the window as the haze began to dissipate over New York. A soft smile appeared on his lips as he thought of little Lily and her simple yet profound wisdom. If the seal is missing, the paper is worthless. At that precise moment, he realized he owed her much more than a roof and food. He owed her a lesson that had probably saved him from ruin. When the meeting resumed 15 minutes later, the atmosphere had drastically changed. Victor Stone, visibly agitated, took his seat with his eyes fixed on his documents, avoiding all eye contact. The Hamilton Group investors, for their part, were now clearly leaning toward Alexander, impressed by the way he had dismantled the attempt at manipulation. James Hamilton spoke. "Mr. Sterling, after reviewing the original documentation you've presented, the Hamilton Group is satisfied with the explanations and is willing to continue our collaboration on the original terms." Alexander thanked him for the vote of confidence with a sober gesture. The victory was sweet, but something in Victor's defeated attitude intrigued him. He had expected more resistance, some other ace up his sleeve. "If there are no further matters to discuss," he announced, "I propose we conclude this meeting." As attendees gathered their belongings, Victor approached Alexander. His usual arrogance had been replaced by an almost desperate expression. "This isn't over," he whispered, ensuring no one else could hear him. "I still have information that might interest you." Alexander looked at him skeptically. "You've already shown your hand, Victor. There are no more cards." "Are you sure?" A twisted smile appeared on his lips. "What about Maria Morales?" The name dropped like a stone in Alexander's stomach. Maria Morales, Lily's mother. What could Victor know about her? "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, trying to maintain his composure. Of course you do." Victor leaned closer. "The woman whose daughter so conveniently returned those documents to you. What a convenient coincidence, don't you think?" A chill ran down Alexander's spine. How could Victor know that detail? "I'll wait for you at the lobby cafe in 10 minutes, Victor concluded. "Come alone, unless you'd prefer this information to reach the media tomorrow morning." Without waiting for an answer, Victor walked away, leaving Alexander plunged into confusion and unease. After dismissing the investors and ensuring everything was in order, Alexander went down to the lobby. His mind was buzzing with questions. What connection could there be between Victor and Maria Morales? Was this all an elaborate trap? In a corner of the building cafe, Victor was waiting with 2 cups already poured. Alexander sat across from him, waving away the offered drink. "Speak clearly, Victor. What game are you playing now?" Victor took a photograph from his pocket and slid it across the table. It was an image of a woman around 35, with the same sharp face and penetrating eyes as Lily. She was in an office, next to a photocopier. "Maria Morales worked for me 4 years ago," Victor explained. "She was a secretary in my legal department, until we discovered she was selling confidential information to the competition. Internal documents, strategies, client data, a whole catalogue of corporate betrayal." Alexander looked at the photograph in disbelief. "And you expect me to believe the mother of a girl living on the street is an industrial spy?" Victor let out a dry laugh. "Industrial spies have children too, Alexander, and when they get caught, sometimes they end up on the street." "What does this have to do with me?" Alexander asked, increasingly irritated. "Don't you see the folder you lost, the girl who casually finds it? The whole thing smells like an orchestrated plan." Victor leaned back in his seat. "Maria Morales has been following your career. She knows exactly who you are and what documents might be valuable to you. She probably ordered her daughter to steal that folder during one of your meetings." Victor's words seemed absurd, but they planted a seed of doubt in Alexander. Was it possible that everything had been an elaborate manipulation? "Assuming what you say were true, what do you intend now?" he finally asked. Victor smiled, feeling like he was regaining ground. "I have enough evidence about Maria Morales' past activities. If this story hits the media, your meeting today will look like a farce. Businessman recovers crucial documents thanks to the daughter of an industrial spy." Imagine the headlines. Alexander kept his face impassive, although internally his mind was working at full speed. "Unless," Victor continued, "unless I accept your offer to sell shares," Alexander completed. "How predictable, Victor." Victor shrugged. "The classics never fail. You have 24 hours to decide. 40% of the shares at half price, or this story will be in all the business newspapers tomorrow." He rose to leave, but Alexander's calm voice stopped him. "Do you know what Lily told me this morning, Victor? She said her mother taught her that if the seal is missing, the paper is worthless." Victor frowned, puzzled. "And what does that mean?" "It means that even a 9-year-old girl understands something you've forgotten. Details matter." Alexander stood up. "Your threats are based on assumptions and coincidences. You have no real proof that Maria Morales is connected to my lost folder. Because there isn't any. Are you willing to take that risk? Victor challenged. Completely, Alexander responded serenely. Because unlike you, I have something to protect beyond money and power. Victor narrowed his eyes, confused by this new facet of his rival. You'll regret this, he warned, before walking away. Alexander remained for a moment in the cafe, processing the conversation. The accusation against Maria Morales seemed unlikely, but he couldn't completely dismiss it. He needed answers, and there was only one person who could provide them. Returning to his office, he found Lily diligently drawing in a notebook Sarah had provided her. The scene, so innocent and everyday, contrasted brutally with Victor's somber insinuations. "How was your meeting?" the girl asked, looking up from her drawing. A tall building with many windows, probably inspired by where they were. "Good. Thanks to you and the seal you saved," Alexander replied, sitting next to her. "Lily, I need to ask you something important about your mother." The little girl's face tightened slightly. "What about Mom? Did she ever work for a company called Stone Developments?" Lily pondered for a moment before slowly nodding. "Yes, a long time ago. It was her job before cleaning houses." Her eyes darkened. She didn't like to talk about it. She always said she met bad people there. "Do you know why she left that job?" The girl shook her head. "I just know she came home crying one day. She said she had been accused of something she didn't do, and that she couldn't work there anymore. After that, it was very hard to find another job. No one wanted to hire her." Alexander felt a pang of compassion. The story fit with what Victor had told him, but from a completely different perspective. "Lily," he said softly, "where is your mother now?" "At St. Jude's shelter," she replied, her voice suddenly small. "She's sick. That's why she couldn't stay with me on the street. The sisters are taking care of her while I look for help." Her words, devoid of self-pity, hit Alexander harder than any of Victor's accusations. This girl was not part of any plot. She was simply a daughter desperate to help her mother. "Can I see her?" Alexander asked, making an instant decision. "Your mother. I'd like to meet her." Lily's eyes lit up with cautious hope. "Really? Now?" Alexander nodded. "Right now." As he organized their departure, informing Sarah he would be out for a couple of hours, Alexander reflected on the turn his day had taken. It had begun with him desperately searching for documents to save his company, and now he was heading to a shelter to meet a woman who, according to Victor, was a criminal, but who, according to his instinct, was simply another victim of circumstance. And at the center of it all, a girl who, with her simple, direct wisdom, had reminded him what truly mattered. The details, the truth, and the humanity often lost in the world of business. St. Jude's shelter was housed in an old red brick building in the Bronx. Unlike the corporate skyscrapers of the financial district, the architecture here was modest and functional, with small windows protected by wrought iron bars and a discreet entrance flanked by 2 pots of wilting geraniums. When the taxi dropped Alexander and Lily off in front of the shelter, a light rain had begun to fall again, as if the weather intended to underscore the solemnity of the moment. Alexander was surprised to find himself feeling nervous, an emotion he rarely experienced before multi-million-dollar negotiations, but which now gripped him at the prospect of meeting Maria Morales. Lily walked ahead with familiarity, nodding to the doorman, an older man with a white beard, who opened the door for them without asking questions. The interior smelled of hot soup and disinfectant, an oddly comforting combination. "Mom is in room 4, Lily explained as she guided Alexander down a narrow corridor. "That's where they put the people who need more quiet." A middle-aged nun crossed paths with them, offering a tired but genuine smile. "Lily, dear, I didn't know you were coming today," she greeted, and then observed Alexander curiously. "And this gentleman?" "He's a friend, Sister Teresa," the girl replied seriously. "He's going to help us." The nun assessed Alexander with a look that mixed hope and skepticism, like one who has seen too many broken promises. "Maria is awake," she finally informed him. "The visit will do her good." When they reached door number 4, Lily stopped. For the first time since Alexander had met her, the little girl seemed genuinely nervous. "Mum doesn't know I've been looking for you," she confessed quietly. "Don't tell her I was gone so many days. She'd worry." Alexander nodded, moved by the maturity and concern this child showed for her mother. Lily gave 3 gentle knocks before opening the door. The room was small but clean, with freshly painted white walls and a window overlooking an inner courtyard. In the only bed, A woman around 35 was reading a worn book. Despite her evident thinness and the paleness of her face, Maria Morales retained a serene and dignified beauty. The same intelligent eyes Alexander had seen in Lily returned his gaze with surprise. "Lily!" she exclaimed joyfully, extending her arms toward her daughter. The girl ran to hug her, and for a few moments Alexander felt like an intruder in a profoundly intimate moment. Maria kissed her daughter's head while whispering words of affection. Finally, her gaze settled again on Alexander, who remained by the door. "And this gentleman?" she asked with a voice that, although weakened by illness, maintained a firm tone. Lily separated slightly. "He's Mr. Alexander Sterling. He helped me, Mom, and he says he wants to help both of us." Maria Morales looked at Alexander with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "Mr. Sterling," she murmured, as if the name sounded familiar. "Do we know each other?" Alexander took a step forward, approaching respectfully. "Not personally, Mrs. Morales, but I believe you know my name because of my company." A shadow of recognition crossed Maria's face. "Sterling Investments," she slowly nodded. "Yes, I know it. How did you meet my daughter?" Alexander looked at Lily, remembering her request, and decided to omit the complete details. "We met this morning. Lily helped me with a major problem," he explained, "and now I'd like to return the favor." Maria stroked her daughter's hair with a protective gesture. "My Lily is always helping everyone, even when it's us who need help." Her voice adopted a more cautious tone. "What kind of help are you offering exactly, Mr. Sterling?" "To start, appropriate medical attention," Alexander replied without hesitation. "I have contacts at Mount Sinai Hospital. They could examine her today, properly diagnose her condition, and provide the treatment she needs." Maria's eyes widened in surprise. "Mount Sinai? That's—" She broke off, as if trying to find the right words. "It's very generous, but I can't accept such charity without understanding why." "It's not charity, Mrs. Morales," Alexander gently corrected. "It's a debt I owe your daughter, and if you'll permit me, also to you." Maria frowned, confused. "To me? I don't understand." Alexander took a deep breath before continuing. "You worked for Victor Stone a few years ago, didn't you?" Maria's face instantly hardened. "Did he send you?" she asked, her voice suddenly cold. "Because if so—" No, Alexander hastened to clarify. "On the contrary, Victor Stone is my competitor, and today he tried to use your name to hurt me." Slowly, Alexander explained to Maria what had happened during the meeting, Lily's intervention with the sealed document, and finally, Victor's insinuations about Maria's employment. Past. As she listened, Maria's face changed from surprise to indignation, and finally to deep sadness. "So he's still using that lie," she murmured when Alexander finished his story. "After all this time, what really happened?" Alexander asked delicately. Maria looked at her daughter, hesitating whether she should speak openly in front of her. Finally, she decided Lily deserved to know the truth. "I worked as a secretary in Stone Development's legal department for 3 years. It was a good job with a salary that allowed us to live decently," she began. "One day I discovered documents showing irregularities in some contracts. Victor Stone had forged signatures to obtain land at prices far below market value." She paused, remembering. "Naively, I believed I should inform Human Resources. The next morning I was accused of stealing those very documents to sell them to the competition. It was my word against Victor Stone's. Guess who won?" "I believe you," Alexander said, without hesitation. "I've seen what Victor is capable of." Maria smiled bitterly. "I was fired, of course, and Victor made sure no other company in the sector would hire me. I survived cleaning houses for a while, but when I got sick—" She looked at Lily with moist eyes. "Things got complicated." Lily hugged her mother tightly. "It doesn't matter anymore, Mum. Mr. Alexander is going to help us." The girl's absolute confidence moved Alexander. It was a responsibility he hadn't sought, but which he now wholeheartedly accepted. "Mrs. Morales," he said, sitting in the room's only chair, "I propose the following. First, immediate medical attention. Second, an apartment where you and Lily can live with dignity. And third, when you recover, a job in my company, if you wish." Maria looked at him in disbelief. "Why would you do all that for strangers?" Alexander smiled. "Because your daughter taught me something invaluable today. She reminded me that in the smallest details, like a seal, lies the difference between failure and success, between a lie and the truth. After a long conversation, where they agreed on the practical details, Alexander made several calls. In less than an hour, a private ambulance was waiting outside the shelter to transport Maria to Mount Sinai Hospital. As he helped Maria into the ambulance with Lily clinging to his hand, Alexander felt a strange sense of fulfillment. In one day, his life had taken a complete turn, but not in the way he had feared that morning. He had saved his company, yes, but he had also found something he didn't know he was looking for, a genuine human connection, an opportunity to make a real difference in someone's life. As the ambulance drove away, with him and Lily inside alongside Maria, Alexander looked out the window at the Freedom Tower, silhouetted against the now clear New York sky. From this perspective, the problems that had consumed him that morning seemed tiny. A small hand slipped into his. Lily looked at him, with a mix of gratitude and hope. "Thank you," the girl whispered. Alexander gently squeezed her hand. "No, Lily. Thank you for reminding me what really matters." 3 weeks after the providential meeting between Alexander and Lily, the lives of the three protagonists had undergone notable transformations. Maria Morales, diagnosed with severe anemia and the onset of pneumonia, was responding favorably to treatment at Mount Sinai. Alexander had rented a bright 2-bedroom apartment in the Upper West Side, where Lily had already settled in, decorating her new room with colorful drawings of buildings and bridges. Alexander, for his part, discovered a new dimension to his existence. Daily visits to the hospital and dinners with Lily had become the most anticipated part of his routine, gradually displacing the corporate meetings and business dinners that previously consumed all his time. That spring afternoon, Alexander arrived at his office with renewed energy. The story of the businessman who had taken in a girl from the street and unmasked a corrupt rival had leaked to the press, generating a wave of public sympathy that not even the company's public relations department had anticipated. "Good morning, Sarah," he greeted his assistant as he accepted the coffee she offered. "Anything new?" "Several things, actually," she replied, consulting her tablet. "Business Today magazine wants to do a profile on you. The Sylvester Group has insisted on arranging a meeting to discuss a potential collaboration, and the director of St. Joseph's School called. He says they have a spot for Lily as soon as she's ready." Alexander nodded, satisfied. "Schedule the meeting with Sylvester for tomorrow and call the school to confirm. Regarding the magazine," he hesitated for a moment, "tell them I'll accept the interview only if they don't mention the personal situation of Lily and her mother. Their privacy is not for sale." Sarah smiled, already accustomed to this new, more conscious and protective Alexander. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and calls, but his mind constantly returned to the project he had begun to formulate in recent days. When lunchtime arrived, instead of ordering food to the office as was his custom, Alexander decided to go for a walk. His steps led him almost unconsciously toward Central Park, where Lily had found his lost folder. Sitting on a bench, watching the tourists and locals enjoying the spring sun, Alexander reflected on the twists of fate that had connected him to that peculiar family. The memory of a recent conversation with Lily came back to him. They had been visiting Maria at the hospital, and on the way back, they passed a luxurious residential complex under construction. "Why are the beautiful houses only for rich people?" Lily had asked, with that characteristic combination of innocence and depth. The question had hung in the air, without a satisfactory answer. And now, as he contemplated New York, from the park, Alexander began to glimpse a possible answer. Not a theoretical answer, but a practical solution. Back at the office, he called his executive team for an emergency meeting. At 4 in the afternoon, the boardroom was full. The financial director, the head of operations, the chief architect, and the marketing manager occupied their usual seats, all with expressions that ranged from curiosity to concern. "I've gathered you to present a new project," Alexander began, standing up. "An initiative that will transform the direction of our company and I hope the lives of many people in New York." Over the next hour, Alexander laid out his vision, a social housing division within Sterling Investments, dedicated to building affordable yet dignified homes, combining modern design with accessible prices. The first project, which he himself would finance, would involve the rehabilitation of an abandoned building in the Bronx to create 30 apartments for vulnerable families. "We'll call it the Lily Project," he concluded. Reactions varied. The financial director expressed concerns about profitability, while the architect was enthusiastic about the creative challenge. The marketing manager, for his part, immediately saw the potential for improving the corporate image. "This isn't just about image," Alexander clarified firmly. "It's about purpose, about using our resources to make a real difference." After an intense debate, it was agreed to conduct a feasibility study and present a concrete plan within a week. Alexander, however, had already made his decision. The Lily project would become a reality, regardless of the obstacles. That evening, while having dinner with Lily in the Upper West Side apartment, he told her about his idea. The girl's reaction was pure enthusiasm. "Really? Beautiful homes for everyone?" Her eyes shone with excitement. "Can I help design them?" Alexander laughed, infected by her enthusiasm. "Of course. In fact, you are the main inspiration for the project. That's why it will bear your name." Lily was momentarily speechless, which was unusual for her. Then, with touching seriousness, she asked, "Will the first house be for Mom and me?" "If that's what you want, absolutely," Alexander replied. "Although I was hoping that you would consider staying here with me." The proposal, formulated almost shyly, hung in the air. Lily looked at him with an intensity that seemed to pierce his soul. "Like a family?" she finally asked. "Like a family," he confirmed, surprised by how natural the word sounded on his lips. The smile that illuminated Lily's face was all the answer he needed. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The meeting with the Sylvester Group, one of the largest construction companies in the US, turned out to be surprisingly productive. Impressed by Alexander's personal story and the vision of the Lily project, they proposed a strategic alliance to develop social housing initiatives in several American cities. "It's a unique opportunity," explained Charles Sylvester, the patriarch of the family group. "We combine our construction capability with your design innovation and social focus. We could revolutionize the concept of affordable housing in the US." The agreement was signed a week later, with the presence of the specialized press. To everyone's surprise, Alexander insisted that Lily be present during the signing, sitting discreetly next to Sarah in a corner of the room. When photographers requested the traditional picture of the signatories, Alexander motioned for Lily to join them. "She is the true architect of this project," he explained to those present. "Without her wisdom, none of this would exist." The image of Alexander Sterling and Charles Sylvestre flanking little Lily, dressed in a simple blue dress and a radiant smile, occupied the front page of several newspapers the next day, accompanied by headlines that spoke of a revolution in social housing. Maria Morales, now in the recovery phase, observed these events with a mixture of gratitude and astonishment. During one of Alexander's visits to the hospital, while Lily was drawing in a corner of the room, Maria expressed her feelings. "When I worked for Victor Stone, I witnessed so much empty ambition, so much corruption. I came to think all businessmen were the same," she confessed quietly. "I'm glad I was wrong." Alexander gently took her hand. "I was wrong too, Maria. I thought success was measured solely in figures and contracts. Your daughter taught me there are other ways to measure a life's worth." A week later, Maria was discharged from the hospital. The move to the Upper West Side apartment was completed that same day, with Lily meticulously organizing the space to make her mother comfortable. That night, the three of them had dinner together for the first time, as the strange and wonderful family they were beginning to be. "I have something to propose to you both," Alexander announced when they finished dessert. "Lily, your mother and I have talked, and if you agree, I would like to begin the process to legally adopt you." Lily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She looked at her mother, who nodded with an emotional smile, and then at Alexander. "Will you be my dad? For real?" she asked with a trembling voice. "If you want me to," he replied, trying to control the emotion in his own voice. Lily didn't respond with words. She simply got up from her chair, went around the table, and hugged Alexander with all the strength of her small arms. He held her close, feeling something he didn't know was broken inside him begin to heal. "Only if we help the kids who sleep on the street," Lily whispered against his shoulder, "as part of our project." Alexander looked at Maria over the girl's head, finding in her moist eyes the same commitment he felt growing inside himself. "I promise you," he replied, kissing his future daughter's head. "That will be the heart of the Lily project." And so, as New York City fell asleep under a starry sky, in an apartment in the Upper West Side, A new family and a new purpose were simultaneously born, intertwined by fate, compassion, and the wisdom of a girl who knew that seals, like promises, are only valid when they are genuine. Autumn had arrived in New York, dyeing the parks with ochres and golds. In the 4 months since the chance meeting between Alexander and Lily, the Lily project had gone from an ambitious idea to a reality under construction. The rehabilitated building in the Bronx was already showing its new facade, with large windows designed to maximize natural light and balconies where plants and flowers would soon grow. That October morning, Alexander was in his lawyer David Chen's office, reviewing the final details of Lily's adoption process. The procedure had proven more complex than expected due to Maria and Lily's previous situation of precarity, but it finally seemed to be nearing its conclusion. "The judge has set the final hearing for next Thursday," David explained, adjusting his glasses as he went over the file. "All reports are favorable: stable economic situation, adequate housing, positive psychological evaluation. I don't foresee any obstacles." Alexander nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. The thought of legally becoming Lily's father filled him with a happiness he had never experienced in his years of professional success. "Have you heard anything else about the lawsuit we filed against Victor?" he asked, changing the subject. David's face darkened slightly. "Stone has hired one of the best law firms in New York. They're trying to discredit Maria's testimony, claiming her illness could affect her memory and credibility." Alexander clenched his fists, containing his indignation. "It's despicable, but predictable," he muttered. "Do you think we have a chance?" "Documentally, his case is weak," David replied, "but Victor has connections everywhere. I wouldn't underestimate his ability to influence the process." The conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Sarah, calling from the office, sounded worried. "Mr. Sterling, a messenger just arrived with an urgent envelope from Stone Developments. He insists on delivering it personally." Intrigued, Alexander asked for the call to be transferred to the messenger. "Good morning," he said in a neutral tone. "What is in that envelope?" The voice on the other end sounded nervous. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Stone asked me to inform you that it contains a proposal related to the Lily project and Mrs. Morales' legal situation. He said it is in your interest to review it as soon as possible." Alexander exchanged a glance with David. What was Victor plotting now? "I'll be in my office in 20 minutes, he finally replied. "Wait for me there." During the drive back to the Freedom Tower, Alexander tried to anticipate the content of that mysterious proposal. Knowing Victor, it could be anything, from a veiled threat to an attempted bribe. When he arrived at his office, the messenger was waiting in the reception area. He was a young man with a college student appearance, probably a temporary employee with no real connection to Victor's affairs. Alexander signed the acknowledgement of receipt and took the envelope to his office, where David was already waiting, having arrived a few minutes earlier. "Let's see what new game Victor has devised," Alexander murmured as he opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document several pages long and a brief handwritten note. "Alexander, the media and legal war benefits neither of us. I propose a truce on the terms described in the attached document. Think carefully before rejecting it." Victor, Alexander, and David read the document carefully. In essence, Victor proposed dropping all accusations against Maria and providing a letter of recommendation that would rehabilitate her professional reputation. In exchange, he requested that Sterling Investments cede a 10% stake in the Lily project to Stone Developments. "It's shrewd," David commented. "He's seen the media potential of the project and wants to jump on the bandwagon." Alexander contemplated the document with a thoughtful expression. On the one hand, accepting would mean peace for Maria and remove an obstacle in the adoption process. On the other, it would involve allowing Victor, with his questionable values, to be part of something pure and noble. "I can't decide this alone," he finally said. "I must consult with Maria." That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Alexander and Maria discussed the proposal on the apartment terrace. "It's your project, Alexander," Maria said after listening. "Don't let my past condition it." Alexander took her hands. "It's our project, and I won't allow Victor to taint what we've built." The next morning, Alexander sent his response, a firm yet respectful refusal. There would be no agreements with someone who had tried to destroy lives for ambition. The Lily project would maintain its integrity, regardless of the obstacles. 6 months later, the Lily project had exceeded all expectations. The collaboration with the Sylvester Group had allowed the initiative to expand to 3 NYC boroughs, providing dignified housing to families in need. On a sunny spring afternoon, Alexander, Maria, and Lily, now legally a family after the adoption was finalized, participated in the inauguration of the first rehabilitated building in the Bronx. The old abandoned property had been transformed into a bright space with 30 apartments, common areas, and an urban garden on the rooftop. "This is just the beginning," Alexander announced to the cameras. "Our goal is to rescue 100 children from the streets this year and provide permanent homes for 50 families. Lily, standing beside him, cut the inaugural ribbon with scissors that looked huge in her small hands. Applause rang out as the first families received the keys to their new homes. Among the attendees, Victor Stone watched the scene from a distance. When their eyes met, Alexander perceived something unexpected in his former rival's eyes, a mixture of respect and perhaps regret. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, the girl asked him in a sleepy voice, "Why was that bad man looking at you today?" "Perhaps he was learning something important," Alexander replied, kissing her forehead. "Sometimes, even adults need lessons." 2 years passed with the speed of a sigh. Lily's 12th birthday was celebrated in the community garden of the 4th residential complex of the Lily Project, surrounded not only by her family, but also by dozens of children who had found a home thanks to the initiative. During the party, while Lily blew out the candles on her cake, Alexander approached Jane Miller, the social worker who had supervised the adoption process. "I never imagined this path for myself," he confessed. "I built skyscrapers for years, but now I understand I was building in the wrong place." Jane smiled as they watched Lily, who was enthusiastically explaining her ideas for future buildings to other children. "You've built something much more valuable than any tower," she replied. "You've built purpose, for yourself and for many others." The Lily Project had become an internationally studied model. The combination of innovative design, accessible prices, and community focus had revolutionized the concept of social housing in the US. Meanwhile, Victor Stone had disappeared from the New York business scene after a corruption scandal unrelated to the Sterlings. His downfall proved once again that the truth always finds its way. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Alexander and Maria contemplated the lights of New York from their terrace. "For the first time," Maria whispered, "I feel like we've found our true home." 5 years later, Lily, now a 17-year-old high school student, was preparing for her final year. Her passion for architecture had grown with her, and her room was filled with sketches of sustainable buildings and community spaces. The Lily Project had expanded to 10 American cities, transforming entire neighborhoods and, more importantly, the lives of hundreds of families. One afternoon, while reviewing her college applications together, Lily showed Alexander an essay she had written for the School of Architecture. "My father taught me that the most important buildings are not the ones that touch the sky, but the ones that sustain people." Alexander, with moist eyes, hugged his daughter. That essay had perfectly captured the evolution of both of them. Lily, at 24, graduated with honors in social architecture from Columbia University. At the ceremony, her parents watched her with indescribable pride. The Lily Project had helped thousands of people, becoming an international benchmark for social innovation. That afternoon, they visited the Freedom Tower together, where it had all begun. From the top, New York looked different but more familiar than ever. "It all started with a lost folder," Alexander murmured, "and a seal that was worth more than it seemed," Lily completed. At the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Lily Project, Alexander announced his partial retirement. By his side, Lily revealed the plans for the most ambitious project to date, a self-sustaining complex on the outskirts of New York. "To lead this new stage," Alexander declared, "we need a new name." Lily stepped forward, taking the microphone. "Dad, let's call it Sterling and Daughter, Social Architecture." Alexander nodded, tears in his eyes. Maria hugged them both as the audience applauded. That simple phrase, "If the seal is missing, the paper is worthless," had become not only the company motto, but the reminder that sometimes the smallest act of honesty and compassion can change the world. The girl who once held a wet folder in the rain now held the future of thousands, and Alexander, who once measured his success in figures, had learned that true wealth is measured in the lives we touch and the difference we make.